In 10.
You're next.
Roar. Skal jeg ta introduksjonen? Introduction.
Yeah, I'm going to I'll just say the I'll just say okay.
Hjertelig velkommen til første foredraget med vår eminente gjest Marcus Nicholls, som da redaktør i for de dere som ikke kjenner til Model Magazine. Han skal fortelle litt om hvordan han utfører væring på trykken. Da det bare rett og slett å si the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi everyone. First I'd just like to say thank you very, very much to IPMS Norway guys for inviting me over. It's my first time here and really, really friendly atmosphere, so thanks to everyone. Thank you very much for turning up to see my little talk. Way, way more than I'm used to at Telford, which is the show we normally do every year in the UK. Normally have about 5 guys standing around looking like they're waiting to catch a bus, so this is very nice. A little bit intimidating, but thank you. You may know me from Model Magazine. Been working on that mag for nearly 22 years. The magazine's been going since 1985, and I became the editor in 1996. So, and it's been through various ups and downs, different publishing companies, but for some reason they kept me on board. Goodness only knows why, but I've been working away with the magazine, and it goes worldwide. You may be familiar with it, you may not. I'm the editor-in-chief of the magazine, and I also edit this magazine, which is Military Illustrated Model, which we launched a couple of years ago, and I share the editorship with Brett Green from SKALA on this magazine. And I'm also group editor for our plastic model titles, so I'm kind of there to help out with people, our other editors. And I'm also a modeler. I've been building models since I was about 8 years old, so 38 years. For a long time, when I first started on the magazine, I tried to put a model in every single issue of the magazine, but it's very, very tiring, so I kind of scaled that back to building models whenever I could. So there were periods where you've seen my models in the magazine, every single issue, and then it goes down and up and down and up, but I've been basically modeling almost constantly for the last 22 years, which is putting out maybe 12 models a year, so it's quite tiring. I'm in England what we call a jack of all trades but master of none, so I do a little bit of everything to a reasonable standard, but nothing compared to some of the stuff you see out here. But one of the things that we have with magazines are deadlines, and the magazine, if you think of a magazine production, is a little bit like a conveyor belt at a supermarket, in that all sorts of things go by, but it never ever stops. It's always going past, and so we're running around all the time trying to put the magazine together, and it's like a car production line. And you see these guys building cars.
Helt til venstre.
And they have to walk along with the car. And it's a bit like that with the magazine. That the printers absolutely control us. printing magazines are very expensive, and the reason we can keep the cost down is to stick to these deadlines. And so there are certain ways around building models that we do to make them a little bit quicker to build. I suppose the word cheats could be used. It's a little bit of a negative word, but there are shortcuts, little tricks that we can do to speed the modelling process up. Because when a kit comes in, say, like this Enigma from Tamiya, standard procedure for us is that we get whatever Tamiya have ready for us. So in the case of this model, I think we got this model as a box of sprues, really not matched very well, because I believe that the production kit is in the usual sand-coloured polystyrene that you'd be used to in a Tamiya kit. But we get the test shop sprues, which are grey, and the standard T55 kit, which are the dark green parts. So you can see it's actually quite handy for the article, because you can see exactly where the new parts are for the model. So in a strange way, it actually makes it easier for us to show what we're doing with this new kit. But it does mean that we have to build that model very, very quickly. In the case of this one, I think I had 10 days. So you have to learn certain little tricks around, but also it can't just be a rubbish job, because people very graciously give us their money to have these magazines, and they want to see at least a half-decent result. So it's a compromise between speed, getting it in, because we can't compete with the internet. It's much more instant, obviously, from what we use. But one thing people do like is a good old-fashioned paper magazine, we still find. So that's what we can offer. It's a nicely built model, but as on time as possible. So I built this kit as quickly as I could, adding a few little details. As you can see, the red bits of my wire that I've had. If you're a regular reader of Tamiya Model magazine, you'll have seen this red wire lifted up in many of my model builds, and it's a roll of thick copper wire that I shall we say, borrowed from a previous employer. That they'd obviously decided they didn't want anymore, and it's appeared on my models for about the last 20 years. So you can always tell one of mine and one of Angus Crichton's models, actually, because I gave him some. It's got this horrible pink wire on it. So we added a few little bits on this, and basically the paint scheme. I used this new Vallejo. You can see that sort of colour modulation set. Kind of worked. It's a useful series of paints for getting this instantaneous effect, but the cynic in me says that I could probably have just painted the whole model in just sand, and it would have been just as good. So I mean, it's up to you whether you decide to go this route. For my demonstration today, I've chosen a very simple route. Obviously it's not the same vehicle. This is a mule model really that I keep, which is just one of Tamiya's pre-built models that they did a while ago, and it's obviously the Bradley. I didn't build this came from the factory, and I've just base coated it in sand. In fact, it's a really handy colour that Tamiya do, which is their wooden deck tan, which is I think it's XF78. I think it is anyway. It's wooden deck tan. I think it's one of their more recent colours, looking at the number. And it's a really good, I mean obviously it's intended for modern ships because it's for the kind of the teak decking on the ship, but it's actually a really good all-round buff. And I've used this from everything from Dunkelgelb for World War II German vehicles, modern vehicles for dust, all sorts of stuff. I think at a push you could probably use it in some aircraft camouflages as well. So it's one of those all-round really handy colours. The model's just been base coated here, so basically in comparison to the Enigma model, where you can see several different stages of colour depth, shall we say, running from really quite a deep brown, getting gradually lighter. This colour, when we got this set, this colour was actually out of sequence, so I wanted to use the set absolutely to the letter. And this really rather funky brown jumped in midway and made the whole thing look rather like a carrot. So I thought, that doesn't quite look right to me, so I quickly oversprayed it with the next one, and it looked a lot better. And then we got back on track with the kind of the gradually lightening colours. The final effect, I think, is quite interesting. Obviously, you're looking at a printed page through a video camera, so you can't really see brilliantly the kind of the transition, but it gives it a lot more depth than just giving it a basic coat of sand. So it kind of gets the ball rolling, if you like, because adding shading and colour volume and depth is quite difficult when you do that manually by adding washes, because the whole model tends to darken. And starting off with this technique where it's a top lighting effect, so it looks like there's a very bright sunlight coming down from the top, gradually darkening towards the bottom, and we're simulating this with paint straight away, so immediately you've got this base colour. That's not what I've got here, because I just want to show you a few simple techniques according to this thing that I have with these deadlines in the magazine. So a few little cheats, a few little quick things that we can do to give a model a bit more life. I'm going to do a couple of techniques on this thing that wouldn't really be appropriate to a Bradley, probably, because they're probably quite reasonably well looked after, although I guess at the end of combat they wouldn't. But they're going to put a few rust techniques and washes, and it's going to look a bit more hammered than it may normally do. And it's really just to show a few little things that you can do. So with this model, it's very angular, lots of nice sharp edges. Obviously paint wears off on sharp edges, whether it's the crew getting in and out, items of equipment being dragged over it, even to the extent of the weather. So if this was a quickly painted vehicle for the desert combat, relatively good chance that the sand colour would have been a very thin layer of paint, and even in a sandstorm that might actually scour off, and certainly with the crew going over it, it's going to start rubbing off. One thing that people have been doing for a long time is a sponge, using a sponge technique. And you can take pretty much any sponge. This is very kindly provided to me from one of Edward's sets. They use this lovely grey medium-sized sponge that seems to give a nice torn edge. But you can use pretty much any sponge, depending on how coarse you want the chips. And obviously the size of the cells in the sponge completely dictate the effect you're going to get. One thing to do is always tear the sponge rather than cut it, because then you get an instantly uneven natural effect. So you can just tear that up, get yourself a little chunk. One of the most useful colours, I like these, although unfortunately, thanks to the pressure changes in the plane, I had an exploding bottle of black. As you can see, that originally he said model colour by Vallejo under there, and this is, they've changed the name slightly to German Camouflage Black Brown. It used to be called SS Camo Black Brown. I think they had a little bit of political adjustment there to not have the SS thing in there, so now we have German Camouflage Black Brown, so it's basically a very, very dark chocolate brown, and it's an incredibly useful shade, I find, for all sorts of stuff. Particularly this chipping, because it's quite good at depicting exposed steel that's just lightly oxidised. Key with these paints, always give them a really, really good shake, because they do settle, and the solvent that they use is a little bit glossy when it's not mixed, so you want to make sure that that's really, really well mixed. And then the other thing I find with these paints is they do this, nicely bubbling out. Then the special thing that they do for my demonstrations are they never come out of the bottle. So wish me luck. Now we've got a little bit here. Okay. Well, I'm using just a bit of plastic card here. You want a non-absorbent base. You can use it on tile. If you go to a tiling store for kitchens and bathrooms, they almost always have boxes of broken tiles, and they'll either sell you for almost nothing, which is good. They're brilliant for mixing up paints, and you can just either scrape them clean or chuck them away at the end. This is what I do. I've got a pile of old kitchen tiles. Take your sponge. Is this in the right angle? Get some paint on the sponge, and then dab it around until you get this kind of very fine model. I tried one the other day and it was very grainy, and then I tried another colour and it was absolutely smooth. So I think these need a little bit of experimentation. I like the AK product range. I think it's very exciting stimulus for armour modelling because there's all these interesting colours, sparking people's imagination. But as for the quality of these, it's a case of experimentation. They've got a good range. You use a dark grey fading. These initial ones, I think, have been released for ship modellers. So you've got some quite shippy type shades here. See, I'll just put a little bit out on this piece of plastic card here. The dark grey there, a little bit of rust, dark brown. Because the grey is going to be a very cold tone. Too much. There you go. Oh, there it goes. Less is more with this technique, as the phrase goes. Because you can always let it dry and do another layer. If you saturate the model in a colour wash, all it's going to do is flow straight off the model. It's not going to settle in the recesses. So you don't want it flooded with liquid. Similarly, if you put it on too dry, you're not going to be able to move that colour around, and it's not going to flow by capillary action down into these natural gaps. You want to strike that sweet spot, that balance where it's just enough as a film on the model to sit, run where you want it to go, but not run off the other end and it will run out, because it will. Then capillary action of gravity will pull it straight out the other end of a piece of detail, and you'll end up with a lovely puddle at the back and none in the detail. So I'm going to use this white spirit. I think there's a couple of other alternatives used by modelers nowadays. One of them is the humble enamel thinner, which is not white spirit at all. It's naphthalene, which is a very, very light spirit. It smells like mothballs if you're used to old clothing storage. And it's very headache-inducing. It's kind of like ether. But it's a very light spirit, and it's terrific for colour washes when you really want it very controlled, because it doesn't flow very far, because it's evaporated before it's really had a chance to flow. The white spirit is much less volatile and smelly, but this is the non-low odour one, but it's fine. There's a little bit of light oil in there. It's basically aviation fuel, isn't it? It's like kerosene, really. It's kind of an oily spirit. And it's good for general usage. Depending on the area you're going to work on, you can wet the whole area first with a light layer and then flow your washes in and allow them to go, or you can put the wash on dry and then work around it and wet it so that it spreads. So I'll do a bit of both. This is a 7mm flat brush. It's actually one of Humboldt's new brushes, and they're quite good actually, I have to say. Normally I buy a range from either Windsor or Newton. They do a range called Cockman brushes, which are blue handles. They're quite expensive, and they actually don't last very long. But I always tell people to, when choosing brushes, budget for a brush and then buy the next expensive one. Always buy really good brushes if you can, because it will pay you back in quality. Cheap brushes, it's not even the amount of time they last, it's just the effect you get. It's worth spending a bit of extra money on these. But these are actually not bad. Normally brushes aimed at the modelling community are normally pretty awful. They're not the best brushes. You want to go for artist brushes, but they're getting better and better. Vallejo do their own modeller's brushes, they're excellent, but again they're not cheap. I'll put some of this, try to get a sheen on that so you can see that it's literally just one stroke. If you can, do it in panels that are naturally occurring on the model. So you can see there's a kind of weld seam or something here. In fact, I'm going to go right to the end there because that's an area that's okay. Because if you go too far, it's pointless because that'll have evaporated by the time you reach it, and also it might encourage the wash to disappear off into the distance. Prefer a smaller brush to actually do the wash. I tend not to make a pot of wash up without you swimming around because you don't really need very much. I just literally make it locally on this card. You can see that taking shape down there. So we want to make it a pretty neutral kind of colour. See the consistency there is it's very thin, very light. And then I'm just touching touching these bowl heads with this wash. There's enough white spirit remains on the surface for this wash to just zip around each little piece of raised detail. But not so much that it goes flooding across the whole surface of the model. Probably a little bit heavy there because I can't quite see what I'm doing here, but it's okay. Because one of the things that I certainly did for years, and I'm sure a lot of modelers do, is they'll putting a wash on and they'll go like that. You get a bit too much, and they panic and they want to get it straight off again. You don't need to. This stuff, this is oil paint, it stays workable for hours, probably days actually, but certainly a few hours, and for sure a few minutes. So you can let that dry, and it won't be permanent. The best thing is to let it dry, and then you can kind of trim it, if you like, with a clean brush. Just very, very lightly moistened in white spirit. So if you overdo your wash, just let it dry as it is. Don't try and remove it, because what will happen is the brush has got its own capillary action with the hairs, and it will just draw back out the wash that you've already put in place. So what you want to do is build up a layer of pigment sitting around that detail at the base, and then, as I said, if it's too much, let it dry, and then just kind of almost like erase it with a dampened brush. And I'll carry on putting these on just for now. As you can see, that's starting to dry above me there. You can see that. So I'm just going to reapply this, but avoiding the bits I've already done because I don't want to wipe them out. But I'm not flooding this whole surface of the vehicle with colour wash. Just want a very localised application, just to highlight these bolts. There's a lot of products now designed specifically for these kinds of things from the various manufacturers as premix colour washes. They tend to use enamel paints with a white spirit. I think they're very handy and very good, but I find that when an enamel paint or an oil paint is being washed, is being mixed down with the solvent for too long, it actually destroys the varnish that was originally with the colour, with the paint. And its kind of staying power is diminished. And I really much prefer making a fresh wash, a fresh batch, with clean thinners, fresh oil paints, and applying it, because I think, for me, that's not criticising these pre-made colours, it's just, I find that works better for me, because when the paints are fresh, they just seem to flow better, they seem to work better. But then again, I have had success with these pre-mixed colours, so it's just a case of experimentation. And they are really handy if you're in a rush as well, which I've always used to do. So you can see here, we've kind of overdone those top ones. And we can come back to those and trim them, certainly on the top of that bolt head. This bolt head here where the wash is actually sitting on top of that bolt head. That's not a problem. Leave it to dry and come back later with a clean brush, just dampen in white spirit, and you can just rub that off. And it's very, very straightforward. With these little spots that I did a minute ago, this is all very compressed, by the way. This would normally go over space in a few days, but I'm just trying to squeeze this in. I've got a lighter rust shade here. You can see that it's pretty much an orange there. It's like a fresh rust. You need a very fine brush for this. This is really stretching the limit of my unaided eyes. What you want to do is just put this dot of this rust right over the top of those dark dots you made earlier. If you can see that. You just cap those off with this stuff and then give that a few minutes to dry. Even on model paint, this matte finish is very absorbent, and that will actually drain off some of the oil, and it will allow that oil paint to slightly set, even in a few minutes. You want to use a completely on the floor brush. Oh, thank you very much, sir. Cheers. Completely dry. Work those little spots of oil downwards, oil paint downwards, I should say. And then you can just create some very, very quick and easy rain-induced rust streaks where the paint's blistered and popped up through the base colours. Again, probably not appropriate for this vehicle, but it's just to demonstrate the effect. That can be refined to the nth degree. You can take this and really draw those streaks down, add different shades, alter the direction of the rust where it's run around the bowl and stuff. That's fine. For me, job done. I can finish the magazine now and then I can go to bed. That's normally done at 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's a slight cheat, but you know it's quite effective. Spent a little bit more time doing that on this vehicle. Basically, probably see one or two, perhaps on the side of the turret there. I think there's one here. And by the time we photographed this model in the studio, it's gone through my graphic designer's Photoshop and he's changed the colour because he thinks it looks nicer. And we put some sharpening on the image and then it gets printed on our paper, which in this magazine is actually very nice. In my normal magazine is cheaper because paper is very, very expensive in the UK. A lot of that subtlety is lost anyway, so you can spend an awful lot of time refining your modelling techniques, and then unfortunately we print it on our cigarette paper and it's all gone. So the cynic in me knows what I can stretch to get into the magazine, and that's not a kind of trade secret or anything. It's just the fact that with the magazine work, it's a strange combination of hobby for me, because this is how I got into the magazine side of stuff, but it's also my job. So I'm trying to balance being efficient and getting the models built as quickly as possible, and also getting some enjoyment out of the modelling, because it's pointless if you're not enjoying it, and it shows in the model. If you really haven't enjoyed it, see the ones I haven't enjoyed, the ones I have. I mean, I love doing this one. This was fun. T55s are always great fun because you will very rarely see an immaculate T55 unless it's just rolled out of the factory, and even then I think they were probably pretty beaten up. Certainly by the time that the various armies had a go at these enigmas, they were heaps, and so that's a great target for modelling. Chris Jarrett from Canada, his thing is the Merkava. And he has his own very colourful, distinct style with vehicles, and as I said, he's working his way through the whole Merkava range. And doing some wonderful work with his extreme techniques. He's on another planet compared to me, this guy. He's doing some fantastic weathering. And he seems to be mega quick, so he's obviously got some kind of secret to to finishing these models quickly and energetically. He's an off-road mountain biker, so I think he's a kind of adrenaline junkie. So I think he does this mountain biking and then comes back and does it with coffee in his veins and stuff. So he's I'm more of a cigar and red wine guy, you know what I mean? But, so I'm going to do a little bit more generalised wash on the front of this vehicle now that it's had time to set, so you can see perhaps the difference between what we might call a colour wash and a filter. These are great. In the UK, I don't know about you guys, always looking for things to mix paint in. When we were taking pictures on film. Do you remember the little Kodak film pots with the lid, and particularly the Fuji ones that were semi-translucent, so you could actually see what was left in it. Absolutely wonderful. Digital comes along, where have they all gone? I feel sorry for the company that made trillions of those little film pots, because, and I actually ended up washing them instead of just slinging them out, but I just really couldn't be bothered. So that was very annoying. I had to find a source of clean, disposable, very cheap mixing devices. And we had a party a little while ago where we had a Mexican thing, and I needed some shots of tequila, obviously, because you have to, don't you? I mean, it would be rude to have people round to have Mexican food and not have tequila. So I wanted to have something that I didn't want to buy a whole load of shot glasses. And in the UK we have a chain of shops called Pound Store or Poundland. The clue's in the name, everything's a pound. So they love it when you ask them how much things are. So they do packs of 40 and 50 plastic disposable shot glasses for £1. So that's a pack about that tall by about that wide. These are the fellas, and they're polystyrene, so you can't really go putting lacquer thinner or anything too strong in them, but for acrylics and for about an hour of white spirit before it crazes it, they're absolutely brilliant. And you just throw them away at the end. And also because they're food quality, they're completely clean, there's no dust or rubbish in them, and they come stacked up like that, and this is what I now use. So I don't know if you have an equivalent of this shop here, but these are great, and if you find them, buy them up. So I'm going to make a little colour wash here, or a filter, it's called a filter. For this I'm going to make a slightly larger quantity. That, to me, that's a large quantity. I'm going to use this 2 shades of rust. So what I want to try and show is that you can alter this kind of the base tone of it just by putting this thin colour wash or filter over it. This is quite different to what I did on the side, where it was very localised. The pigment was just kept purely within the edges of the bolts and the joints. With this one, this is going across the whole surface of the model. What this does do is, the effect this does is to darken the whole paint finish, which is why some people who start off working on a model and they paint the model in, let's say, olive drab, straight out of the bottle. It's already pretty dark, because most olive drabs offered by model companies now are quite a good match for real olive drab. There's no scale lightening, there's no fading built into that. So as soon as it goes on the model is instantly very dark. So if you start putting colour washes on, it gets darker and darker and darker until you know there's a lot of good work on it, but you can't see it because it just looks like a jet black brick sitting there with tracks. And it's worth spending some time before you put any paint on a model, thinking how much colour washes, how much weathering you're going to do to this model, how much is that going to reduce its overall brightness in tone, and then preempting that by actually increasing the brightness of the base colours in advance, so that when you put your colour washes on, it actually brings it down to the correct shade. So this looks very, very bright and plain. If I was finishing this model to the end, this would come down in several steps in terms of brightness, just by these liquid washes that are going to go on. That can bite you if you don't put enough on, and the model ends up looking like this thing from a Disney set. It looks way too bright. But hopefully, you can gauge the amount that you're going to apply to the model, and it'll darken down as you put your weathering on. This is going to be quite hard to show because it's a fairly subtle effect. But if I just do these frontal areas, you can maybe just see. Obviously, it's still wet, so it's slightly darker, but you can maybe just see. There's a slight warming in colour tone, there's a slight orangey browniness there. Very handy for representing the atmospheric conditions. If you're or rather the environmental conditions, if you're building vehicles of Vietnam War vehicles, models of Vietnam War vehicles, the cliche is a dark glossy green AFE tank, whatever, with this bright orange dust over it, and people criticise Verlinden for doing this in his dioramas. You know, you have this very dark US Marine Corps green with this incredible kind of carrot-coloured dust over the whole thing. There's a series of pictures on the internet that absolutely vindicate him, and it's a column of Sheridans coming through a jungle clearing, this luscious Vietnam jungle, and where they've churned up the dirt in the path, the soil is almost blood red. It's incredible, and it's all over the vehicles, and if you did it on a model, you wouldn't ever get anywhere in a competition because it just looks too extreme. But it really did look like that in certain parts of the country, and so to replicate that on a vehicle, these filters are quite handy because you can start to build up that base colour of dirt over the vehicle. You may want to then go in with pigments and deeper colour washes, but to alter that base shade. Because if you ever see a vehicle, a tank in action, when it fires, you know, Hollywood would tell you that the flash comes out the barrel and drives off. You know, in reality, we all know that the whole thing rock and rolls. The shockwave that comes out throws up all the dust and it just lands straight back on the tank. And there's a film of muck over the whole vehicle, right up to the top. I mean, I've been criticised in having muddy footprints and dirt on turret tops. And apart from the commander probably going to stand on the turret roof to see where he is, there's every chance that mud is going to come up from the shock of the gun firing and dust and land on the whole vehicle. Quite easy to find shots of that on the internet, so it's always worth considering the violence of these vehicles, the amount of energy that's created when the gun fires. It just throws up dust everywhere, and when they're rolling, obviously, there's great columns of dust coming out the back of the tracks. They're incredibly filthy. And for modelers, we really do need to bear that in mind and keep the effects in check. Otherwise, it just looks like you've just put it in a bucket of mud, shaken off the dirt and put it down there. So I'm going to stop rambling now because I don't want you to be bored. But just touch on a little couple of techniques that I find are quite handy for the requirements of the magazine, which is effective, quick, and we can move on to the next one. And if you can get some use out of that, I hope you can. And I envy all of you for the time you have on your modelling, because I don't seem to get enough myself. But that's about it. If you've got any questions at all, please do come up and see me afterwards or whatever you'd rather do. So hopefully that's some use.
Any questions? Inget spørsmål? Ja? Yes, I'm satisfied.
That's no problem. Thank you very much anyway. Thanks for sticking with me.
From IPMS Norway for inviting me across. I feel very honoured to be asked across here, and even more honoured to be have it done as a freebie. Unlike Marcus, I'm not in any way a professional modeler. I just fiddle around at the weekends and when I get in from work, if the wife will let me. I reckon I'm a pretty good modeler, but I'm not by any means the world's best ship modeler or best modeler at all. And looking at some of the work outside on the competition tables, there are people here today who are far better than I am. What I would like to do is just to show you some of the techniques that I've developed over the last 10, 12 years since I've been concentrating on ship models. I've done all sorts of modelling in my time. I've been modelling since I was about 8 years old, and I did airfix kits to start off with, and then I Tamiya tanks when I was about 14 or 15, and then I went on to Hysterex figures when I was at university. And then I lost interest for a few years because work got in the way, and then I made a couple of wooden farm carts, got back into plastic again, made an 18th century frigate plank on frame, which unfortunately the cats pushed off the shelf. And so for the last 10-12 years I've concentrated mainly on small scale ships and a few figures. So what I'd like to show you is my techniques for handling photo etch with regards to ships, particularly the railings, which I think a lot of people find rather off-putting if they're not a ship modeler. The way I do it, I think I found a fairly simple way of getting them on and getting them in the right shape. I want to show you how to turn a mast without using a lathe. I want to show you my technique for rigging using very fine nylon fibres. If I have the courage, I'd like to try to show you, I don't promise that it will work, I'd like to try and show you how to make the cage aerials that they used to have on old ships in the early days of wireless. And finally, I'd like to show you how to make an anchor chain by braiding it out of wire. So, let's first of all think about photo etch. If you take an ordinary model ship with no photo etch at all, it looks dead. But if you add some of the little things, particularly railings, it suddenly comes to life. And I would always encourage you to try and put these things onto a ship. It really does make a difference. And since photo etch has become available, it has made a world of difference to small scale ship modelling. There are a number of makers of photo etch for ships. The two main ones are the British makers White Ensign, and then the American ones Gold Medal. They have large ranges of photo etch, all extremely high quality, and I don't think there's much to choose between them really in their most recent productions. So here I have a piece of photo etch by White Ensign, which was for the USS Indianapolis. I didn't use the railings on from this one on the ship itself. I used some Gold Medal. So I think I'll probably take a piece of this and show you how to use it. The reason for that is it is a little bit heavier than the Gold Medal, so it'll show up a little bit easier on the video. On the other hand, we have some Gold Medal railing, which is incredibly fine. It's so fine that it's almost scale width for the chains, but it's very very fragile and does take a little bit of care to use, but it is very usable, and I almost always use this one. There are also lots of other things that are available in photo etch, and I'd just like to show you a couple of fun things that I've discovered recently. There's an American firm called Alliance Model Works, and they produce lots of stuff which can be used in small-scale dioramas. This is a fret for American railroad wagons and shunters. There's enough there for about 14 railroad wagons of various kinds. And if I can just show you what these look like, can you see that? That's a railroad wagon, and that is a shunter. They went together very easily, actually. This one is quite simple. There's only about 3 parts in this, which you just fold up. It's not particularly challenging at all, but it looks the part. Before we get on to how to do things, let me show you some really fun stuff. This has just come out just recently. This is a firm called 5 Star, and these are American trucks and jeeps in 1/700th scale. I feel those nice men in white coats are coming to take me away with my medication. And here we have one. As they say in the on the cookery programs on TV. Here's one I made earlier. There are 28 parts in that lorry. If I put the hoops for the canvas tilt on as well, there'd be 33. Each of the back wheels is made of 4 separate discs of brass. Absolutely silly. Yeah, I mean, wonderful, wonderful. You can see it is possible to do it. Put those away. Let's do something a little bit easier. Okay, so you have a fret of photo etch. The first thing you need to be able to do is to cut the parts off. And how I do that is I use a ceramic tile. Some people use a piece of glass. Some people, I think, use an old CD. It doesn't matter, as long as it's a very hard, smooth surface. And you cut it, probably most of you, I'm talking to people who know all this anyway, but just bear with me. And you cut it by pressing straight down with a scalpel blade. Now I would always suggest using proper Swan Morton scalpel blades. They're much more resilient than X-Acto knives. X-Acto blades are so brittle they'll crack as soon as you look at them. And if you try to use those for cutting photo etch, they'll do about 2 or 3 cuts and then they'll be useless. These will last at least for a quarter of an hour. And if you're cutting photo etch, use a curved blade. This is a number 15. So what you need to do is you simply press down with the curved blade against the tile and you cut off the length that you need. Didn't work. As I wanted. And the bits that are connecting on the side. If you're doing railings, if you're cutting railings, always just press down and have a rocking motion with the blade. Don't be tempted to try and pull the blade, because all that will do is distort the railings. So you have a length of railing, which you always ought to try and handle using tweezers. Try not to use your fingers any more than you have to, because you'll just distort it and bend it. So you have a length of railing, but you've got to get it around the shapes of the ship, around the edges of the decks. So you need to be able to bend and roll it. And what I use now is something soft and spongy. This I find is the simplest way. You can use these hold and fold devices, but for railings, then really not necessary. So you can either use something like this, which is some foam plastic, which I got from a craft shop. It's about 2 millimeters thick, and it's quite firm. Or another simple thing, it's the back of an old mouse mat. And if you're going to get one like this, get a cheap one, not a really thick, luxurious one. And this is something which was given away by a drug rep, and it's really cheap. And the reason I like the cheap ones is that it's a thin layer of foam at the back. And what this enables you to do is to take a blade, and you can, just by pressing down on the railing, straight across at 90 degrees into this foam, it'll get you to get a nice sharp bend for you. So you just press down, just like that, and up it bends. And you can get a nice 90-degree turn. And you can do it again. And you get another one. And you can go around, and you can make something which will fit around a platform quite easily. Let's just cut off this piece, and I'll show you something else. You can also curve it and make circular shapes. If you take a drill or the handle of a file, and just roll, up it comes into a curve. And depending on how fast you roll, how hard you press, and also on the size of the drill or handle, you'll get different diameters of curves. And there you go, you can get a complete circle. Not quite. Let's make it a shorter piece and try and get a circle that will go around a platform here. Wants to move, doesn't it? It always has a mind of its own.
Do you tend to lose a lot of parts?
Oh, yes, yes. If you went over my carpet with a metal detector. It's a good job it's not made of gold. There you go. We're getting a nice circle. It's not perfect, but that's something there which would go around the platform. So you can make something which will be the railing for a certain platform. So let's now come on to see how I fix railings onto a ship. I'll show you how to put it along the side. And the reason for that is I want to use this in a few minutes when I'm rigging the mast. So let's just take another length of railing. That's a 15 blade, yes.
What manufacturer was it?
Swan Morton, that's the standard manufacturer for proper scalpel blades.
Swan Morton, Sheffield.
Before I put anything on, let's just talk about glues. No, let's just talk about lengths of railing first of all. If you're putting railing onto a ship, don't put it on in very long lengths. Okay, you've got 20 centimetres there. Don't cut off that whole length and glue the whole thing along. There's a number of reasons for this. First of all, there might be the shear of the hull. You've got straight railing, but perhaps a curved shear on the hull, so it wouldn't necessarily fit. Second reason, and probably more important, is what we call differential expansion. When a model is exposed to changes in temperature, it'll expand or contract. So will the metal. But they will expand and contract to different extents. Maybe the metal will get a little bit bigger. And if you've got a very long length, then that little bit is enough to cause the railing to pop away from the side of the ship. So if you put it on in very short lengths, any expansion is only going to be a very, very tiny amount and it will probably stay attached. Also, it's easier. And another thing to consider with regards to differential expansion and contraction is the adhesive that you use. It's very tempting to use super glue, and people will often recommend that. I don't, because super glue may be very strong in what we call in the forces pulling things apart, but it has very poor strength in what we call sort of shear direction, like that. And if you're using this to put your railings on, if you do get differential expansion, it won't hold. I always use PVA glue, ordinary white glue, woodworking glue, or any of the white glues that you can get. There's not much to choose between them. And I dilute it about 50-50 with water. And that enables it to flow off a paintbrush.
This is the same as regular white glue?
Yes, exactly the same stuff. Probably give too much water, never mind. Right, that'll do when we come to it. Now, I'm a terrible one for the shakes. If I'm doing something that's very precise, and I've got to get it in exactly the right position, my fingers go. So, I like to have the railing in the right position before I apply any glue. And this is how I've managed, or how I've worked out how to do it. Came away without a ruler. I take some masking tape and cut very narrow strips. About 1.5 millimeters wide, and then cut some lengths like that. And you can pick up a piece like that. And what I then do is I put it against the side of the ship, like that. And I put them on about 1 every 1.5 centimeters. Just like that. And what that does, it acts like, well, they're like stanchions for the railings. I can then take my length of railing and I can put it down against the side of the ship. You see, there's my shakes. So I'm going to turn it around and do it the way I can see it. There you see it. The railing is sitting at the edge of the deck, and it's just being held very, very lightly by that masking tape. I now take a fine brush and the PVA glue, and apply a not quite in position, needs to go down just a little bit more, that feels like it. Apply a thin bead of glue along the side of the ship.
Do you let that dry completely before you continue with the second part of the railing, or?
No, you can do the next bit, and then when you've finished, come back and take the masking tape off. It'll just take a couple of minutes to dry. So that's a very simple way of dealing with railings. You can use exactly the same technique if you're putting railings around a platform. If it's a square or rectangular thing, you can just put the pieces of masking tape all around, and if you've bent it at the right angles and right lengths, it'll fit exactly, and it's completely the same technique. I'll leave that for a few minutes. We'll take it off in a few minutes. Let me just go on. Let me show you how to turn a metal mast without using any kind of electrical tools. You don't need a drill, you don't need a lathe. People will often talk on the internet about replacing metal masts, and they'll say, oh, I put a length of brass rod into my Dremel and then I go at it with a piece of wet and dry paper. I think that's entirely unnecessary. You can do it very simply just with an ordinary pin chuck. Find the right size. Piece of brass rod, appropriate size for your mast, whatever size it is you want, and you want it to taper a little bit. So all I do is, I don't know whether you're going to get this onto the... Take a fairly sharp file, you hold the rod so that it's flat against the surface of your work table, and basically you just go at it with a file, and you're turning it all the time towards you. And every stroke of the file needs to go to the far end. The different strokes can start at different positions down the rod. The effect of that is that the end will get more filing than the butt, and therefore you will end up with a taper. And you're doing this just by eye. I'm not going to try and do the whole thing. It'll take sort of 10 minutes to get down to an appreciable, visible taper. But that's the idea. Extremely simple, and you say you don't need any kind of electrical tools to make your masks for small-scale ships like this. Of course, you can also do the yards, which have a taper both ways. What you do then is you'd have your piece of brass, the right length for the yard, you put it in halfway, go at it one way, take it out, turn it round, go at it the other. And when you finish filing, you just take some wet and dry paper and polish it up a little bit. Or simple, as they say. Right. So this should have dried now, so we can take off the masking tape and the railing is firmly fixed, and it's nicely at the edge of the deck, and there's hopefully no curves and waves going along it. Indeed, yes. Right, let's go on to rigging and how I do my rigging, because that is my speciality. There's no one right way, or one right technique for rigging a ship. Basically, what works for you is right for you. And this is what works for me. I've tried doing it with stretch sprue like Jim Bauman does. I can't cope with that. Although there is no one right way, there is one wrong way. Don't use sewing thread. Okay? I know, when you're a kid and you're making your Airfix hood and you want to put something in, you'll rob your mum's sewing box to get some black thread. Okay, if you're a kid, but we're grown-ups. Don't do that. Far too thick, and it's all got fibres coming off it, and it's sort of furry. It looks horrible. So what I use, I use two things. Most of what I use is this stuff. It's called Canis. It's a nylon monofilament which is intended for fly fishing, and it's meant for tying flies on very, very tiny hooks.
That's why you live in Glasgow, actually,
Yes, indeed. Yes, that's why I discovered it. I don't know whether I'm the first person to discover it for model ships, but yes, this is that's just about the only place in Britain you can get it. But you can get it also from America if you go to Stockyards. Now, say it's thinner than a human hair. Can you see it? Thinner than a human hair. Because it's on a reel, it's fairly easy to use, and it's strong. Yeah. So it's going to stand up to the occasional touch. The other things that I use, and my wife loves me for this, it's the handles from department store carrier bags. Some of them are braided in such a way that you can extract a hank of fibres, and then from that extract a single fibre. This one I think is slightly thicker than the Canis. That is nylon again. I assume it's nylon. I was going to say it's free, but of course it isn't, because your wife has just spent God knows how much on clothes to get you that. Let me show you something even sillier than that little truck. This is the finest stuff I ever found. Again, it's from a department store carrier bag of some kind. And this is just the most amazingly thin stuff. It is almost invisible. It's very hard to control this stuff.
David, we talked about this and denier, the thickness of the thing. Have you got an idea how thick that is in millimeter or inches?
No, I really don't know.